Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest foray into the listener questions mailbag. On this episode, we're looking at the best player never to score a goal. We're comparing the MLS and Saudi All Stars. We're asking if alternative soccer leagues can go mainstream, and much, much more. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, it's Mr. Graham Ruthven. The Graham Ruthven's on our show. Can you believe it? Hi, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. The still image of Ryan Bailey for anyone watching on YouTube. Actually, Ryan has been stuck like this for a number of days. It's a real medical condition, and so they've sent him to the Isles of Scilly. You know how they used to back in the day send people to the seaside to mend them? Ryan has been sent to the English Channel because he's been stuck like this for days. It's quite concerning at this point.
Thank you very much, Graham. Yes, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, smash like and subscribe, etc. I'm in an English location called the Isles of Scilly, Scilly. Look it up, listener. It's very, very nice, but doesn't like video. They're not keen on video here, Graham. What can I say? I don't want to give away my assassination coordinates too much, but
it's such a small location. You're fearful you're going to dox yourself if you turn on your camera.
It's possible. Joe Lowry's here, though, from the desert. Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm great, Ryan. It is at times easy to see why the UK lost their grip on almost the entire world because they don't even have Wi-Fi in that nation. So I think I can understand how you all managed to fumble that bag, which, probably a good thing for the rest of us.
Yeah. Can I actually say, I don't know how Graham is able to do a podcast 5 times a week because every time it comes to the UK, the internet is terrible. What happened to this?
I don't go to places like the Isles of Scilly. I'm in a large city.
Yeah, but you're in
millions
Scotland.
Of people.
Come on.
You should come up here sometime. I'll show you good Wi-Fi.
No, I'm fine. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you're going to find our bonus content, by the way. Bonus episodes, bonus video, and of course, access to our Discord server. All the cool kids are hanging out there talking about the Isles of Scilly and much more. It's just a silly name. I like it very much. There we go. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Thank you very much indeed. Hey, Joe. You ready? Mailbag's here. What do you want to do
Bring
about
it?
Let's do it. Okay.
Open it.
Let's open it up right now. Ben K has been in touch with this question for us. Who would win in a game between the MLS All Stars and the Saudi Pro League All Stars? Now, Joe, according to global football rankings, MLS is the 9th bestest league in the world. Saudi Pro League is the 31st. Saudi has 18 teams. MLS has 30. Does that have any bearing on your answer to this question?
Nope, not at all. Although I do think those are interesting data points and a reminder about how top-heavy the Saudi Pro League is and about how not organic their build has been over the last several transfer windows. The Saudi Pro League All Stars would win by a country mile. If you play this game 100 times, they would win 80-something of them, or at least have really positive results in a huge chunk of these games. I went through and built my 11 as an illustrative tool for Saudi Pro League. I didn't build one for Major League Soccer because I didn't have to. So I'm going to go through my Saudi Pro League All-Stars. Graham, I don't know if you built an 11 or not.
Yes, it did.
Okay, great. So I'm curious to see how this compares to you. Who doesn't love a good building of an 11, right? I mean, this is just high-level stuff.
In this case, goal, MLS, because they're going to look bad.
Correct. Although I think Saudi are sort of a unicorn here in a lot of ways. But in goal, I have Yassine Bonu, the Moroccan goalkeeper that people may remember. A couple of other choices as well, but I went with Bonu. At center back, I have Mohamed Simikan and Emerick Laporte, who are both still excellent soccer players, formerly of RB Leipzig, Simikan. I have João Cancelo at right back. I have Renan Lodi, a relative position of weakness, I think, in Saudi, if anyone cares. At left back, I'm running a sort of a 4-4-2, so I have Fabinho and I have Milinkovic-Savic as my 2 midfielders at the heart of my structure. I have Moussa Diaby on one wing and Sadio Mane on the other. And I have Cristiano Ronaldo and John Duran up top as my strike pairing. Plenty of other attacking options. That's like a really good team. That's like this team could win a major international trophy team. That's like a team could hang in the Champions League kind of team. At least not embarrass themselves in the group stage, the phase-inning part 2, the phase. Like that is a legit team. Spending power that MLS just does not, by and large, infuse across their league. Saudi are playing a completely different game. We talk all the time about how in MLS spending does not correlate to success because it doesn't, right? You can look at Atlanta United, you can look at Austin FC. Just because you spend money doesn't mean you're going to be successful. But in Europe, spending on wages is a huge correlator to success. Like it is the strongest correlator to success. And the takeaway from that is spending only matters when you're doing a ton of it. And Saudi are doing a ton of spending, and it's starting to correlate to real quality at the top of their league. And we're going to see that some of the Club World Cup as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think the discrepancy between those Opta rankings that you led us in with, Ryan, is pretty easy to explain, honestly. And that reason is the Saudi Pro League has an aggressive homegrown quota, or rather, it's the other way around. It has an aggressive foreign player allowance. So each team is only allowed to sign 8 foreign players, and they have some like U21 stuff like MLS does as well. But with the exception of those players, those foreign players, they are largely homegrown teams, and so that is what you're contrasting between MLS and the Saudi Pro League. And I did similar to Joe. I went through the league and tried to build my 11. So I had a choice between Edward Mendy, who is also playing in the Saudi Pro League, or Yasin Bono, who was on my list. Centre back, Joe, you could have also had Kalidou Koulibaly. You could have had Kurt Zuma as well. I think Simikan is quite clearly the best of the bunch there. I actually kind of forgot that he went there, which...
I've forgotten a lot of these players went there, Graham. Like Laporte and Zuma, all these names you're bringing up. It almost feels like a blast from the past.
I think Laporte's trying to get back to European football now. I hope at some point we see Simikan, because he is a lot younger than a lot of these names. Obviously, a lot of these names are kind of getting on in age, a little bit more experience, which is why they go to the Saudi Pro League. But Simikan, I think, must be like 23, 24. So yeah, he went for the bag earlier in his career. I had Cancelo and Lodi as well. I could have had Nacho Fernandez as a left back. In midfield, you could have Joe. Remind me who your midfield options were again.
I had Fabinho, former Liverpool legend, and Milinkovic-Savic. Just because
Milinkovic-Savic.
Yep.
He wasn't even on my list. That's how much depth there is. So you could have had Frank Kessie. You could have had N'Golo Kante. You could have had Osama War. Or he's maybe a bit more of like a number 10. Some other options: Marcelo Brozovic, Ruben Neves, Gini Wijnaldum. And then on the wing, I could have had Riyad Mahrez or Moussa Diaby or Steven Bergwijn or Sadio Mane. And then up front, Benzema, Ronaldo, Mitrovic, John Duran, Ivan Toney. So, yeah, they're pretty stacked as a league for superstars. But once you drill down a little bit further, they maybe don't quite have the depth that MLS does.
All right, well, that's fair enough, Graham. But does the Saudi Pro League have a mid-season break in which they do a little mini tournament with another league? Do they have an onside documentary?
Not that I'm aware of, but honestly, that's got to be coming pretty soon. I mean, I think, Joe, to flip this question, how many MLS All Stars get into the Saudi All Stars team, and is it any more than just Lionel Messi?
That's the name that came to mind for me, Graham, and it's not as clear cut as it would have been like 2 years ago. I think you could make an argument that even Messi doesn't make his way into this team, but yeah, I would have Messi as the lone MLS representative.
Okay, well, Messi might come up in the next question that comes on this show. Ben K, thank you very much for that one. This one from Matt Adler. If every Major League Soccer player was suddenly eligible for the USMNT, how many would make the squad or the 11? And how much does it improve the team? Graham, I'm presuming Mr. Messi might just make the national team cut should he be allowed to do so.
Yes, I think the greatest player of all time probably does feature for a team that...
what about Messi, though?
Lost 4-0 to Switzerland. Well, yeah. Who is the greatest player of all time? Scott McTominay?
Kurt Zuma.
Sure, let's say him. Kurt Zuma. Not to Cats. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 positions you would improve by dipping into MLS. The obvious one being whatever position Lionel Messi plays. I think you would have a good... This is a little bit difficult, actually. I'm starting with the centre-forward position because obviously that is such a position of need for the USMNT. I think you would have a good number of options from MLS, but maybe none that are an absolute home run. Like if we were doing this with the Saudi Pro League, you would say John Duran or Ronaldo or Benzema or whoever. I think accumulatively you would find someone between Suarez, Hugo Kuipers, Christian Benteke, maybe even Kevin Denke might be in your thoughts as well. I know LAFC have no idea how to use him, but I would also have Olivier Giroud in that picture just for what he's done at international level. I think one of those probably would rise to the surface. I'm just not entirely sure which one it would be. I then instinctively thought there must be a goalkeeper I would take over Matt Turner or Matt Freese. I actually think it's quite marginal between the MLS goalkeepers and the options the US currently have, because Matt Freese is one of the goalkeepers in MLS right now who's one of the best in the league, and Matt Turner was one of the best in MLS before obviously he decided to sit on the bench for 3 years of his career. Yeah, difficult with goalkeeper. I don't think there's anyone in MLS that's making the defensive line over the players the US currently have in the squad. But I am absolutely taking a fit and firing Ricky Puig for my midfield, and I can have a double pivot behind him to give him a bit of freedom to do his thing. So I think all in all, I'm taking Messi, I'm taking Ricky Puig, and I'm taking one of the glob of centre forwards that I mentioned.
Genuine question, Graham, because I think that's a completely fair answer. Can this team survive with Messi and Ricky Puig not playing any defense at all? Because that's what dissuaded me from putting Puig into my team, but I'm here for an argument if you can make it that team can survive.
I mean, it would be fun.
Sold.
Yeah, and fun is maybe better than what we've got right now. So
yeah,
let's do it.
Opposition dependent, I would have Ricky Puig in this team. Against like really good teams that the U.S. will face at times in 2026 should they get out of the group, I would probably end up shifting one of those guys to the bench, and that's probably going to be Ricky Puig. He is in Puig, my full 26-man MLS USMNT squad, which I'll get to in just a second. I agree, Messi's got to be in this team. I was tempted by that striker hat as well, Graham. One name you didn't mention that tempts me, and I'll sub him in for Olivier Giroud, who literally cannot run anymore, so I'll drop him from your list. And I instead will add Emmanuel Latte-Lat, who's had a tough go of it with Atlanta. But Atlanta are tragic, and at times if you're a striker and everything behind you is tragic, it is difficult to actually go out there and score goals and do your thing. Latte-Lat's physical profile, I think, is really intriguing. Like his aerial ability for being not the tallest guy, super impressive, lightning quick. I think he's pretty sharp on the ball. I like a lot of his game. So Latte-Lat or one of the other nines that you mentioned, Graham, I think is a really strong pick there. And Messi has to make the cut. I don't think there are any center mids in that double pivot that you were talking about, Graham, like 6s or 8s, that really fully tempt me over Tyler Adams or Weston McKennie when it comes to the starting lineup. You mentioned the defense. Nobody's breaking in there. Center back and fullback is not an area of strength in Major League Soccer. And my left winger, I would keep Christian Pulisic. The right winger that is really tempting me, and you can make an argument that it should absolutely be Tim Weah. The right winger, though, that's tempting me is Anders Dreyer, because I think that dude is unbelievably good. He starts a game for Denmark in the past window, in the June window. Like, he is, despite moving to Major League Soccer from Belgium, which you would think is, all right, that's kind of going to be the end of his national team tenure. It's actually helped his national team tenure because he's been that good for San Diego. The dude can score from anywhere. He is a visionary passer. I mean, he is incredible on the right side for San Diego, like so good. Again, to start for Denmark, you have to be really good. Probably have to be a bit better than you do for the U.S. by and large, or at least as good. Dreyer is really tempting to me. Can I list my? I'm not going to do the whole 26-man squad, but I did have 6 MLS players
Go for it.
in my overall squad. 2 of them came in goal, where I kept Matt Freese and added Daniel from San Jose, who are getting new owners. It certainly seems like that's an exciting one for the Quakes right now. And Roman Berkey from St. Louis. Both have been really, really good since they've been in Major League Soccer. Not a single defender made the cut that's not already in the U.S. pool. Not a single deep-lying midfielder made the cut who's already in the U.S. pool. But I did have Ricky Puig and Lionel Messi in this team. Diego Luna did not make the cut as a result of that squad build. And then I had 2 wingers, added 2 Pulisic and Weah in this team as well. And I did end up leaving out the strikers, but you can convince me otherwise. I have Denny Bouanga, who didn't get mentioned because he plays on the left, and that's where Pulisic, I think, is best so often. Although I don't mind Pulisic on the right either. And Anders Dreyer. Those are my 6. Daniel, Berkey, Puig, Messi, Bouanga, and Dreyer. You can make a couple of other arguments, whether it's a 9. You could convince me about Jeppe Sverskov for San Diego as a deep-lying player over someone like Johnny Cardoso. But at the end of the day, there weren't as many of these guys, Graham, as I thought there were going to be.
Yeah, I had, for my full squad, I had Bouanga, I had Anders Dreyer, and I had Evander as well. Just, I don't really know where he fits into the team just because
doesn't matter.
I thought, yeah. So I think there's quite a lot of overlap. With Giroud, Joe, you're failing to appreciate how much Riz he adds to the USMNT.
Good point.
I saw him with his shirt off, standing at the side of Mercedes-Benz the other day, and that guy still knows where the gym is. He might not be able to run, but he can bench press.
XR is off the charts with Giroud. Always has been, no doubt.
Yeah.
There you go. Was he easy to pick out among the other 20,000 or so people when you saw him there, Graham?
He's always easy to pick out, but especially so for that match.
Indeed. And Joe, how much of an improvement does this make to your USMNT squad were you to make these proposed changes? How much deeper would this team go in a tournament? I suppose bearing in mind you'd weaken other nations in theory as well by doing it.
Take that, Argentina. I think this maybe gets the U.S. one game further in a World Cup. Like, I don't think this is transformational. Ultimately, you still don't feel great about goalkeeping. You still don't feel great about the middle of your back line, nor really the defensive ability of your back line as a whole. Your base of midfield hasn't improved at all. and you have improved in the attack, but I don't think wildly so. Messi is the one difference maker, really, in this team that we're adding into the picture. Maybe Puig for Graham. I think that the U.S. gets stronger here. Obviously, you're adding improved players into the starting lineup. I'm thinking like a round of 32 to round of 16 or a round of 16 to quarterfinals kind of thing, and even then, it's not a guarantee.
Yeah. Graham, you concur?
Yeah, I think that's about right. Messi would come up with something in some game and you'd get a game further.
The Inter Miami principle. We're still waiting for that to come good in the playoffs.
Would he come up with a complaint against the referee or something that would help like that? Maybe?
Yeah.
We'll see.
That's part of the Messi hat trick. Now, incredible goal, complaint against the referee, giant dog. That's the third thing.
Big three.
Giant dog. You can't. That's the kind of detail you can't rule out in these kind of squads. The impact of giant dog. Indeed. All right, Matt Adler, thank you very much for your question. We take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about the US Soccer Federation. We're talking about alternative soccer leagues like TST and the Baller League, and much more. Hey, join us then. Total Soccer Show. Welcome back to our listener questions. Mr. Richard Rolson's been in touch with this one. Over the last 30 months, could the US Soccer Federation and the US men's national team have done anything more to destroy confidence going into this World Cup? Oh boy, Joe, obviously there's a sentiment, Joe, behind this question, which is that I suppose Richard feels that things could have been done better at an executive level on the US side of things. I suppose if I were to side with the premise, perhaps for me it would be the failure to get sort of a buzz going, stadiums full for US games in this year or so leading into the World Cup. I feel like maybe I'm just talking about marketing, to be honest, but it feels like there's something that could be done to get more of an excitement on the ground. But I'm not sure from a sporting perspective or anything like that. I'll turn the floor to you, Joe.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting point, Ryan, and I am curious to hear more from US Soccer about their build towards 2026. Maybe stay tuned on that, listeners. Maybe don't. We'll see. Really, for me, this 30-month stretch, to like actually do the math for a listener in case they haven't done it, this puts us with everything post-2022 World Cup, right? I had to sit down and think about that for a minute. U.S. Soccer definitely have not nailed everything. But I don't really understand, to be honest, where Richard is coming from here. It has been a confidence-destroying qualifying cycle, or not qualifying cycle, but just World Cup cycle for the U.S. But I don't really know how much of that is on U.S. Soccer as like an organization. They have not been perfect. I want to be very clear. I think the big miss was the whole Berhalter saga, right? And it is a notable miss, right? They took time after that World Cup, and there was all the drama surrounding Berhalters and the Reinas. They hired a new sporting director, that was Matt Crocker, in the spring of 2023, who I think, by and large, has done a pretty darn good job when you look at who the U.S. have hired underneath him so far. I know that's not all Matt Crocker's doing. But then rehiring Berhalter took forever, first of all, and ultimately wasn't the right call. It seemed pretty clear following the Copa America that the players needed a new voice in the locker room, right? And whether or not that's Berhalter's fault doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but that whole experiment didn't work. Giving Berhalter a second cycle leading into the 2026 World Cup, the failure the failure at the Copa America with players that needed a new motivation, new voice, that came back to bite the U.S. And that is like a pretty significant mistake. It's hard to nail that stuff, but I'm not trying to like let U.S. Soccer off the hook there totally. But beyond the Berhalter situation, which is, again, significant, I don't think they've done almost anything else wrong, frankly. Like, legit good friendlies on the calendar in windows that good friendlies can be scheduled. They played Germany, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico away, Turkey, and Switzerland since the 2022 World Cup. That's like a legit set of friendlies in windows where it is so difficult to get real opponents. The U.S. have played real opponents. They got Fleur and Balogun on board, lest we forget. I'll never forget you Fleur and Balogun. Dual national recruitment in general has been at a very high level. I think this is still really common among U.S. soccer fans, like fans of the U.S. men's and women's national teams. I think the default is just to point at the federation as like the problem causers for everything. And I think that is a wildly outdated perspective, frankly. Like, I don't understand at this point, with a ton of new leadership at the federation, this is not the 2017-18 Trinidad and Tobago fiasco, where are we going, what are we doing group of leadership. This is a different group, so I don't understand people blindly pointing at the federation and just saying things are their fault. Things have not been perfect, but this seems off base to me. As a team and as a U.S. men's national team, yeah, things have been bad. There's no doubt about that, but I don't think that is necessarily anybody's fault at the federation's level besides the Berhalter saga.
Yeah, totally agree, Joe. I'm sort of at a loss over who to blame specifically. Taylor did a good bit on this after the Switzerland game, where it's difficult to know where to point the finger, to such an extent that there probably isn't one person to point the finger and you've landed in exactly the same place that I did with this question, which was the mistake that US Soccer made post-2022 was the whole process of hiring Greg Berhalter and how long that took. And I think you can trace a lot of the bad vibes back to that period, and the US basically wasted 2023 because of that whole mess. At the same time, that was pre-Matt Crocker. Or at the very least, he comes in towards the end
during that process.
During that process. By the time they hire Berhalter, there's very much the feeling he's kind of been told this is what the Federation wants to do. It's not really his hire. And now a lot of the leadership is different within US Soccer. So, in a sense, the people within the Federation, they paid for that mistake, and we now have different leadership. And even the decision of rehiring Berhalter, I know, we all know, we remember it vividly, there were a lot of people screaming that he needed to be let go after 2022. My position was pretty consistent. I wanted a more ambitious hire if there was one available, but I thought getting him back would be fine for this team. And ultimately, I was wrong about that. But it was, I think there's a bit of revisionism going on here. It was quite a slow burn in terms of how it all fell apart post-2022, and it wasn't until the Copa America that it was really clear that this was over for him. And guess what they did after the Copa America? They got rid of him pretty quickly. So if people saw it earlier with Berhalter than me, then fair enough. But the 2022 World Cup wasn't a disaster, and I thought he did have some credit in the bank after building that team from scratch. After Berhalter, they go out and get a guy that I'm on record on this show as saying there's no chance they'll get Mauricio Pochettino. I still can't quite believe that they managed to lure him to this job. I still think it's the most ambitious, headline-worthy, eye-catching, whatever description you want to use, appointment in international soccer history. And for them to pull that out of the bag and be able to go and get the funding from people who had donated to getting Pochettino in and so on, it's what you want your federation to do. And I am not trying to deny things are bad right now. They are pretty bad. Like I'm a bit panicked that this World Cup is going to go very, very badly, and I think the framing for me has changed from the last World Cup where it was in 2022, how do we make a quarter-final, to now it might be don't get grouped. Like that, in my mind, that's kind of how the framing has changed for this team. So I'm not trying to deny reality. Like this, it's quite bad at the moment. But at the same time, one of my predictions for 2025, back when we did that show at the end of last year, was that this was going to be a difficult year for the US. They had that transition between Berhalter and Pochettino. On top of that, I've seen it so many times when hosts of tournaments don't have competitive games. They sort of go through the motions. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of doubt. You don't really get an opportunity for much evidence. And obviously that puts a lot of pressure on the sort of ta-da moment on the opening game of the World Cup. But I've seen this with other countries. This isn't unique to the US. I remember before 2014, Brazil went through exactly the same thing before their tournament. So in that sense, we're kind of getting what I expected, and I certainly don't think you can point the finger solely at the Federation. Even from, Ryan, you're talking about like from a marketing point of view.
Yeah.
The March games were a calamity in terms of the attendances at those games. That wasn't on US Soccer, that was on CONCACAF. And in fact, when US Soccer has arranged games, like they did for the two friendlies that we just saw a couple of weeks ago, I thought the attendance in East Hartford in terrible conditions was actually pretty good. And I can't quite remember that. Joe, maybe you can remember the Nashville attendance, but
it wasn't amazing in that.
The PayPal Park one wasn't great either, as well, right?
Yeah,
that's on CONCACAF.
But again, that's not a US Soccer organization.
That's not a US Soccer thing. So I am just not worried in any way at all about selling tickets for US games at the World Cup next year. Every single one of those games is going to be a sellout. I think there's going to be buzz by the time that tournament comes around, no matter what the picture is with the national team. Because guess what? A lot of these people who are going to watch the World Cup haven't been watching this team in the last 2-3 years. They're not going to know about these struggles. So I'm not worried in that sense, and I equally think it's a bit unfair to pin the blame solely on the Federation.
Okay. But to play devil's advocate, though, Graham, I don't disagree with anything either of you have said, but the buck stops with the Federation, right? So if things aren't perfect right now, or if they're far from perfect in many respects, whom else do we blame? I mean, maybe this isn't a 30-month problem, but like even the way that grassroots soccer is done in the US, maybe if there was a different approach, there wouldn't be a need for the dual national strategy there is, for example.
Yeah. I mean that seems like a different question and a different issue, right? And I wouldn't. I think Joe and yourself and certainly Taylor would know more about the on the ground stuff, the grassroots stuff than I do as an outsider over here in the UK. But I've read enough and I've heard enough to know that there are issues with the pay to play model and how the grassroots infrastructure was built in the US. So yeah, that certainly is an area where maybe the federation, some blame can be pinned on the federation. But again, that's like generational stuff to rebuild that isn't necessarily attached to one thing in particular. It's probably something to do with investment. It's probably something to do with culture as well. It's probably something to do with like how other sports work, and have the US having to bridge the gap between American sporting traditions and European soccer traditions. So even that, I think, is a difficult thing to address. But that feels like a different discussion.
Yeah, U.S. soccer should just tell all the players from the 2022 World Cup who have stagnated since then to play better. I think that would solve all of these problems, because on the field, it has been a horrible cycle. Like, again, I want to be really clear about that. Like, I understand where Rich is coming from on that front. The confidence has been taken back a notch, because coming out of 2022, it felt like this was a team on the rise, right? A really young group, the youngest, I think, or second youngest based off of average age weighted by minutes played at the World Cup. Maybe Ghana was under them. There was one team that was right next to them in that category. Really young team: Musa, McKennie, Adams. You had Gio Reyna, who was going to come and blossom following the World Cup, and Christian Pulisic and Weah, and so all these guys were going to take the next step. And literally zero of those guys have taken the next step. Like, you could kind of argue that Pulisic has, but I'm not sure that I would really go that far. Still a very good player, and a lot of useful players in that bunch. But this team hasn't improved. And so now Pochettino is finally adding in some new talent to the equation. And even then, it's not really that much new talent that we're talking about. These are guys that weren't ready in 2022 and probably weren't ready for the Copa America last summer. So there are just so many things that have gone wrong for the U.S., and the reality is the player pool has never been strong enough, and was certainly not strong enough in 2022 to be foolproof. So ultimately, when I'm looking for blame, I'm not trying to assign it to specific individuals, but the problem is clear. The problem is that the U.S.'s players that they've had have not improved, and that they haven't had more talented players to add to that group. And the reality that you're faced with then when you look at a pool that is as kind of middling as the U.S.'s is that they can still have really, really bad stretches, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Joe, is the TLDR the gif of we're all trying to find the guy who did this?
Yeah, but also then it's the gif pointing to the players are like okay to good, but not great. So there's your answer.
All right, fair enough. Richard Rolston, thank you very much indeed for that question. We go now to David in the Discord, who has this one. With reference to TST, the soccer tournament, the Baller League, and other similar leagues, do you think any alternative soccer leagues could ever become popular and be successful in the United States? Either an outdoor 7x7 league, similar to TST, or an arena or futsal setup. MASL has been around for a while with long-time successful franchises in cities like Baltimore and Milwaukee. Is there any opportunity for that league to become a bit more mainstream, asks David. Joe, I think my answer to this question is the answer to most things in soccer and trying to get them more popular. It is money. If there is more money, things can be more popular, but it needs a lot of money, right?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm actually curious about your perspective here, Ryan, as the marketer amongst us. Even with money, I still imagine this being really difficult. And I guess I'm curious. So if I gave you a huge budget for this, like almost you can spend as much as you want.
Please do.
How would you go about doing this in a way that it would be successful?
Messy.
And by successful, I'm defining popular. Like, people are coming to these, people are talking about it on social media, and it is sustainable not as a one-time event like TST, like a once-a-year event, but as like a regular weekly event.
I think, Joe, it would have to be, you'd almost have to follow the Ballers kind of strategy. It has to be a soccer product that would
explain what that
alien.
is, by the way, for people who don't know what the Ballers League is.
So the Ballers League is like a league in the UK where the franchise is very social friendly. It's very designed for clips. They'll have like wacky rules where at the end of a game there'll be multi-ball, or there'll be taking players off. There's always weird kind of things just to shake things up. Basically, to us and probably most of our listeners, it looks very alien. It looks nothing like what we expect to see from soccer. And I think, to be honest, Joe, that's probably the route you have to go. If you gave me that massive budget, I would go very social first. I would look to the influencers. I would look to try and engage some of the youth just to get those big numbers up, just to get some sort of broad recognition in the online sphere. And then you get on your Sports Centre top 10 from there, and then you kind of grow from there. That's Graham, that's my theory.
Yeah, I've caught a bit of Baller League this year, and it's quite clearly it taps into YouTube culture, right? Yeah. And that's what you're getting at there. So even the ex-pros that they get, it's people like Micah Richards, or I saw Lee Trundle on there the other day, and so these guys have something to offer in terms of their personality, and I think the soccer tournament has also try to tap into that, but my reading of the soccer tournament, I've seen much more of the Baller League, by the way, than the soccer tournament, but my read of the soccer tournament is that it tries to take itself a bit more seriously, whereas the Baller League is purely just for social clips, and so actually it seems to be quite strong from that approach, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ryan, where you went with this is exactly how I would have gone with this as well. I think you need a bunch of celebrities and probably ones that are popular with the younger kind of teenage crowd to get this going and spread it across social media. Even if you get that, though, I think this still has such a small potential to succeed because the culture is so different in the U.S. Like let's think about the former players that you would get for this, like the Micah Richards equivalent. I don't know, who is that? Like Alan Gordon? Like who are these?
No, it'd be like it'd be like Clint Dempsey, I guess. Like because Richards is obviously a pundit, so you'd
yeah, but Clint Dempsey is so much more famous relative to his like pool of other national teamers than Mike Richards is. You know, like.
Yeah, I think at Joe's point, you need like a US non-soccer celebrity, right, Joe? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you would need that, but you also need the former players, and like those people turn up, and is Alan Gordon or even Clint Dempsey? Are they moving the needle among the general U.S. population? No, of course not, right? Like, absolutely not. Emphatically no.
All right, Joe, how about this?
I don't think these people exist, and I think culturally, the U.S. is just not, like, there are so many more things competing for your attention in the United States than there are in the U.K., right? Soccer is one of many things. Soccer already exists and is popular certainly among certain segments of the population, much less so amongst others, very much geography dependent. To then dig into another form of soccer seems like such a long shot to me as something that could actually catch on.
But Joe, is the flip side of that not that if the US has a broader sporting landscape or entertainment landscape, then why couldn't you add something else to that landscape? I think in the UK it's really difficult to add something else to the landscape because people go, well, it's not the Premier League. Whereas like the MASL, which David references in his question, do you know what the average attendance of an MASL game was last season? It was 2,500 fans, which... It seems decent, for a league that I have absolutely no knowledge of. So I think if you have, yes, money would help, but if you had a clear enough purpose and identity, I don't really see a reason why something like this couldn't survive in the US. And I would actually argue that British soccer culture is maybe harder to crack than American sporting culture, where there seems to be more of an openness to try something different.
Hear me out on this one, Joe. You make it reality show style, like a American Ninja Warrior or whatever it's called. You get teams where you get like Tony Parker has a team, JJ Watt has a team, all these big celebrities from other sports have teams, and they compete in a reality sort of way, and it is a league in itself as well. Do I need to call Netflix? Have I just solved this?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe my mind is too close to this. I'm still just stuck on what Graham's talking about the culture in the UK being harder to crack than the one in the US. And I understand where you're coming from, Graham, because there is like a sort of snobbishness around the soccer that's being consumed. I would rather be faced with that challenge than be faced with the challenge of, dude, I'm not going to go watch soccer. I'm certainly not going to go watch this weird fake version of soccer. I think you would just get so much of that, and I suppose you don't need to get everybody. I don't know. I'm curious what folks in the Discord think about this, because maybe I have a different perspective than a lot of other people who are on the ground here in the U.S. as well. I cannot imagine pitching this to anybody I know and them being like, yeah, let's go. Let's see what that's all about.
Ryan, why did Masters football disappear? Talking of things like alternative leagues that have had some sex.
Because we can't have nice things, Graham. We can't have nice things. That's the answer.
I used to love watching Masters football, and it seemed to be really popular as well. So it's old legends, Joe. So it's like there's no YouTubers, there's no celebrities. It's just like teams of the past playing in five-a-side.
You might have just answered the question there, Graham. No celebrities, no YouTubers. That's why it's gone.
Yeah, that might be it. Oh, that's depressing.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I think actually my idea, which please no one listening steal it and sell it to Netflix instead, of the reality show things. Did Pablo Amaro write an Athletic piece about, was it called Soccer Wars? It was like the early 90s or the 80s, where it was kind of like a violent version of indoor soccer and it had like reality elements. I think...
I don't remember if that's what it was called, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It was that's a thing maybe you could modernise and capitalise on. Here we go. Let's have a think about that, shall we? But yeah. It's a tough market. It's a tough market, to conclude, David. Hope that gets to the core of your question. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, a couple more questions. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Hey, Graham, all those cool cats on the Discord, they're going to get a bonus question about whether Harry Kane should regret moving to Bayern Munich.
Because of their new home kits.
Because that kit is unforgivable. That is the main crux of the question there.
It might genuinely be the worst kit I've ever seen in my life. It's up there. It's horrific.
It's up there with Southampton away, the pink with the yellow this last season. That one actually made my eyes hurt. Anyway, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show to hear that one. But let's get back to our episode here. Matthew Cruz has been in touch, who says, Actually, let's go to Clay W instead. I'm going to save Matthew Cruz to the end because it's a fun, exciting one. Clay W. Clay Dubs, let's hear your one. Which position do you think is the toughest to evaluate a player? My hunch is probably the players with the fewest touches or the fewest stat lines, such as a keeper or a striker, etc. and so on. Joe, I'm running on vibes here, but my supposition is defensive midfield, or kind of like a transition position where you're not sure whether you're using attacking or defensive data. It feels a bit less concrete than other positions in terms of the toughest to evaluate a player. What say you?
Yeah, I think center mid is a good example. I think that is very much towards the top of my list. That is not my ultimate answer to this. Midfielders, though, can be really tricky because their roles are so varied, which is sort of what you're talking about there. I think, though, we've maybe gotten a bit better at, from a statistical standpoint, encapsulating more of the value that center mids provide, right? Where their objective at times is to move the ball from point A to point B. There can be more varied roles there, certainly. But really, I think about, there's a statistic called goals added boost, which is super nerdy, but I'm gonna try to explain what this is. Effectively, it measures what the receiver of the pass, so if I'm the center mid and I pass it to Graham on the right wing, it measures what Graham does with the ball that I've given him. Right, and if Graham goes and does something positive with it, I get a little bit of credit for that. No, you will, Graham. You're going to do keepy uppies around 4 people and score. I get a little bit of credit for that. The idea being, if I pass the ball and I've managed to attract a few defensive players to me, right? I've created more space for Graham. I then pass the ball to Graham. Just a raw passing stat isn't necessarily going to give me a whole lot of credit for that, but I sort of know if I Darlington Nagby this sucker and draw 3 players in and then lay the ball off to Graham, he's going to have a lot of space to go into. So I think we are getting better at encapsulating some of the nuances of the center midfield position with the data. And of course, we can do those things with our eyes as well. But I do think that it is a tricky position to evaluate in a lot of ways. My answer is center back. I think center back is the hardest. There are lots of difficult spots already. I think I've tried to make that clear with the midfield discussion. But I think center back is the hardest because in general, center backs, their job is to constrict space, right? Like I think if we all like sat down and think about what is a center back's primary job, it is to limit valuable space for the opposition, right? Like trying to discourage attackers from shooting and getting into shooting positions. There's the Maldini quote of if you had to make a tackle, you've already been out of position or whatever it was, right? I'm assuming he said that in Italian, so I'm all clear there. It's a hard thing to measure. It's a hard thing to evaluate as well because when center backs do their job well, they're really not noticed. Like there is a low sample size of key on-ball moments for center backs. And even when they do something great, like make a tackle, was it really a good thing or was it because they messed something up just 3 seconds earlier? I think center back is so difficult to really evaluate properly when it comes to their most important responsibility, which is defending, and that's with the eyes. I also think it's hard to do with the numbers as well. Like in general, numbers are really bad at measuring defenders right now, the publicly available stats that we have anyway, because it is about what they do off the ball rather than on the ball. And that publicly available off-ball stuff is harder to see. It's harder to actually go out there and find in the landscape, and a lot of it just doesn't exist. So center back is my pick, but evaluating soccer players is difficult because soccer is a really complicated game. So, Graham, where are you at here?
Yeah, we're going to go around the entire pitch here. What have we had already? Central midfielders, we've had goalkeepers in the questions. I think strikers is fair as well because, you know, are they scoring goals because of the chances their team is creating for them? Like Victor Gyökeres scored about 1,000 goals for Sporting this season. Did he score that many goals because Sporting are a dominant team in that league? Did he score them because he got hot one season and every single chance that he had, he finished? Will he be able to translate that into another league? And then, you know, with XG, you know, does a striker overperforming their XG prove that they're going to drop off, or does it just prove that they're actually that good at finishing? If they underperform their XG, are the goals coming, or are they just crap at finishing? Like, so even strikers, I think, are difficult to analyse. Goalkeepers, for sure, I just don't have as great a read on the mechanics of goalkeepers. But then in other ways, it's easier to evaluate goalkeepers because you don't have any positional analysis, right? Unless you are Manuel Neuer. So I know we talk about modern goalkeepers being good with the ball, but they're still not doing a whole lot with it in a broad sense. So there aren't as many dimensions to their game to understand. But the things that they do, we don't get to see as often as from other players on the pitch in a match. So I think goalkeepers are quite difficult as well to analyse. But for me, it is central midfielders. I've spoken about this on the show before. I personally get a little bit lost with evaluating midfielders because there's just so much to evaluate, and something that I am definitely guilty of is pigeonholing midfielders because it then makes it easier for me to grasp what they are and what they offer. So when there's a player who crosses a few categories, I sometimes struggle a little bit, and I'm trying to be more mindful of that. I think other people are better at evaluating central midfielders than me. But yeah, it's just because they can do everything all over the pitch that's a little bit difficult to channel your analysis into one area.
Yeah, wow. I think that's totally fair. And so much of this is also system dependent, right? Like we see Johnny Cardoso thrive with Real Betis and he doesn't do so well with the US. Why is that happening? What are the differences in systems? I think things get complicated at times for outfield players. I want to go back to goalkeepers, who I actually don't think are like terribly difficult to evaluate at a macro level because they have such clear events. Right, their responsibilities are so much more straightforward. Their most important ones, anyway, than outfield players. Their most important actions are them versus the ball. How are they at stopping the ball from hitting the back of the net? I think it is way easier to gauge that, to measure that. Even if you're just going to watch a bunch of saves, I think it's easier to measure that stuff than it is to determine the value or lack thereof of a center mid making an off-ball run and what that did. And all, I mean, there's just a lot more nuance as you work your way out of the box. There is more nuance to goalkeeper evaluation than what I've just said. Like, it is not all shot stopping. It's positioning. It's claiming crosses. I mean, there's a lot to this. But ultimately, the most important stuff is, I think, a little more clear-cut than actually any other position on the field. So goalkeeper, I would imagine if we tasked someone who'd never played soccer before, like never even seen the sport, like they have no knowledge of any, let's say any sport, I think the position that they could become the best at evaluating the fastest would be goalkeeping. But man, soccer's a complicated game, and this stuff is not easy.
It's not indeed. That much we've learned from this question. Clay W., thank you very much indeed for it. One last one to get to on this episode. Matthew Cruz, the aforementioned. This is a two-part question, actually. Not counting goalkeepers, who is the best player to have never scored a goal? Part 2, who is the worst player with the most goals? And Matthew sets a minimum of 100 career Big Five league goals or 20 goals in a single campaign. Graham, let's start off with the best player never to score a goal. I think we're all going to land on a particular one who I often confuse with the Doctor from The Simpsons, Tony Hibbert.
Oh, right.
Over 260 Premier League games.
I've never made the Simpsons connection before.
Was Dr. Hibbert's first name Tony? It should be. It should be. Anyway.
I can't remember what Dr. Hibbert's first name was.
I don't know either.
Tony, you're right.
But we had the Everton chant, if he scores, we riot, because he never scored. I have one more nominee. Although it's not technically accurate. Kenny Cunningham is one of my childhood heroes. Played for Wimbledon as a right back. He does RTE, does comms for Irish TV these days. I believe he did get one goal in over 600 career games, but I can't find exactly where it was. But I think
not one in the Premier League though, right?
No, not in the Premier League.
I think he played 250 games in the Premier League without a single goal. So
yeah.
he made it on to the top of the listicles that I was, which you might have written actually, Ryan, considering
Probably.
there was a Wombles of Wimbers player at the top of said lists. But yeah, Kenny Cunningham and Tony Hibbert were the two standout options in the Premier League, certainly, that I found. Interesting, Cunningham was a right back, you said, Ryan, right?
Yep.
Fullback, yeah. So Tony Hibbert was also a right back. So that's a common thread between the two of them because they were like no nonsense defenders. And they were old school fullbacks in the days before Trent Alexander-Arnold and whoever else, Andy Robertson or whatever. So, that was a position that doesn't really exist now. They're a bygone. They're a relic of a bygone age.
It's a shame. Kenny Cunningham was marauding, I'll describe him as, and he had a left back on the other side for Wimbledon back in the day called Alan Kimball, and his skill was he could sort of float across it, and it seemed like the ball could stay in the air for an extra couple of seconds. It was like a little golf chip. It was always very beautiful, but it always gave the fellas in the box a bit more time to organise themselves. Very graceful, very graceful. Graham,
I think I've got a good answer for this one. So I'm cheating a little bit. This player has scored one international goal, but has never scored a club goal. And the reason why I think this is such a good answer is all the suggestions like Kenny Cunningham, Tony Hibbert, these are like they're defenders, right? This player, if we're talking about the best player in terms of talent, this guy is really, really talented, plays at a high level, won a title in a Big Five league this season. Billy Gilmore has never scored a club goal. He's played over 180 games in his career at this point. He scored once for Scotland in a friendly away to France. That is the only senior goal that he has ever scored in his career, which it's not really his job, right? He's not a goal-scoring midfielder, but nonetheless, that's quite remarkable that he has somehow managed to stay away from the goal for so much of his career.
Wow.
He plays for Scotland, so that maybe explains some of how he's managed to stay away from the goal for so long, but yeah, he's never scored a club goal.
Wow. Billy Gilles, more like. Anyway. Joe, any nominees?
Billy Golas was sitting right there for you. I don't know. Not sure that was any better.
Too big a stretch.
No, you all have nailed the best player to never score convo. I had Claude Makelele down. I don't think he ever scored for France. But I like the other answers better. Tony Hibbert was on my list, of course. I want to flip it to the other question of the worst player with a bunch of goals, and I feel really good about my answer. Erling Haaland is my pick for the worst player
as well.
with a bunch of goals. Erling Haaland is a unicorn, man. I think that might be the second time I use that description on this show, but the dude is a blunt force object. He doesn't pass the ball. He doesn't touch the ball.
Dude can't play soccer.
All he
Scores
does
50
is
goals a
pop up in
season.
the box, and it is amazing. Like we always kind of push back on the what if our best athletes played soccer thing, because soccer is so much of a more nuanced sport, where it's not like you just plop LeBron James and down into the soccer field and all of a sudden he's an amazing player, right? Like, athleticism matters less in a traditional sense in soccer than it does in, say, the NBA or the NFL. Erling Haaland is one of the dudes that kind of pushes back against that notion because he is more traditionally athletic. Kylian Mbappe is another one, but Mbappe is just so much more graceful than Haaland. Haaland is a hammer, and it rules, and I think he's the answer to this question.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
totally.
Okay. I've got a nominee which I think might be upsetting. And I think it's a harsh question to start off with. How do we feel about the answer to the worst player with the most goals being Josie Altidore? And I'm going with those 20 goal plus seasons in a single campaign. So we had RZ Alkmaar and I suppose Toronto. He's had a couple of good seasons, right? But apart from that, I think he had some dips, I would argue. Have I gone off-piste with that one, Graham?
Wholeheartedly reject that answer.
Yeah, I think just in terms of talent, I reject it. Like, he was a player with some technical ability. I tried to think of, look, I kind of missed the qualification about a minimum of 100 career Big Five league goals or 20 goals in a single campaign. I have 3 suggestions and none of them have done that, so I'm going to cheat a little bit here. But I'm trying to think of guys who were just... I'll try in future. I was just trying to think of guys that were downright bad at soccer. So one suggestion I've got is Marcos Alonso. Scored 48 goals in his career. Has never really been very good. Certainly not at defending, which for a defender is quite important, and amazingly he's played for Chelsea. He was at Barcelona as well, right? I didn't imagine that for a couple of seasons. How did that happen? So Marcus Alonso is on my list, and then I'm going to give you a couple of Scottish examples that I think you will have heard of. But Charlie Adam scored 100 goals in his career when there was literally nothing more to his game than a left foot. Like, he was great at set pieces and would bang in a few free kicks, but the boy couldn't run.
Dude scored from the halfway line at Chelsea. Come on, Graham.
That's because he couldn't be bothered running any further. I'm absolutely knackered here. I'm just going to shoot. And then another Scottish player, Chris Boyd. He is actually the top scorer in Scottish top flight history, ahead of Henrik Larsson, which is remarkable. 222 goals. Couldn't play football. And that was exposed every time he would leave Scotland. He played for Portland Timbers, I think, for a season, or maybe even less than a season. Didn't play for them for very long. Didn't play for Middlesbrough when he went down to England for very long because he was rubbish. He was asked to do more. When he was playing for Rangers were his dominant team, he would just poach in the box, and he was a good finisher. But anything else, he couldn't control a ball, couldn't pass a ball. This is the day before like kind of data analysis or deep data analysis. I think his touches and game involvement numbers would have been absolutely abysmal, even lower than Erling Haaland. So yeah, Chris Boyd is another suggestion.
Okay. On the Marcus Alonso front, will you give me, Graham, David Luiz? Hasn't scored, obviously wasn't a striker by any means, but had a handful of goals. But if you could say he didn't defend, right? And
he didn't defend, but with David Luiz, that felt like more out of choice than the fact that he couldn't defend. He didn't defend, but he could defend. Like, I still think David Luiz had quite a lot of technical ability. Did he not play in like central midfield a couple times?
Yeah.
Maybe not particularly well, but
plus good hair.
Yeah. Excellent hair.
Counts for a lot.
Excellent hair.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Any other noms, Joe, before we close this one up?
No, that's it. I was proud of my Holland answer and disappointed that Graham also agreed. I wanted to be alone. That's all right.
I thought I was going to be the only one with that bombshell about Erling Haaland.
We hang out
just
too
taking
much,
us
Graham.
back to yeah, we do. Just taking it back to players who never scored. Have either of you heard of the story of Carlos Kaiser? From the 70s and 80s. So he was a striker who played in the 70s and 80s.
This isn't the dude who went to a million clubs and never played, is it?
Yeah. Oh no, this is he had 10 different clubs. He played over 100 games. He was a centre forward, never actually scored a goal. He played in the 70s and 80s, and basically they found out that he was jumping from country to country, and of course this is before the internet age, and he was fabricating newspaper clippings about goals that he'd scored in other leagues, and apparently there was a video that he fabricated as well, and this was all to keep getting moves to other clubs. And he played in Brazil, he then played all over Europe, apparently never scored a single goal in over 100 games as a striker.
He must have still been a decent player, though, because yes, you can fabricate all that stuff. Some coach is going to say, all right, let's see you train first, and then we'll put pen to paper. He must have been able to do something on the ball. I mean, that's impressive work on his part. I like it.
Wow. That's a good story. Historically not the worst Kaiser, though, I would argue. Anyway.
That's true, yeah.
There we go.
He's at least second on the list of worst Kaisers.
He's top 5 maybe. We'll see. We'll put that together at some point. But that is our listener questions episode. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who has contributed. If you would like to do so, you can go to totalsoccershow.com/questions, or you can join our Discord, patreon.com/totalsoccershow, if you would like to support this here endeavour. A please and a thank you. But for now, Graham Ruthven, thank you very much indeed for your expertise as always, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Joe Lowery, pleasure as always. I'm a good man.
Thanks, Ryan.
And listeners, thank you again for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly indeed. But for now, bye!